I used to think fate was something that happened to other people. The ones in movies who locked eyes across crowded rooms and just knew. I never imagined it would come for me in a quiet cul-de-sac, wearing scrubs and walking a golden retriever, or that falling in love would feel less like lightning and more like finally learning to breathe. Los Angeles swallowed me whole on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. I remember sitting in my rental car, engine still running, staring at the small craftsman house that was supposed to be my fresh start. The paint was chipped around the window frames. The front lawn had more brown patches than green. But it was mine, or at least it would be for the next year, and that had to mean something. 3 days earlier, I'd walked away from everything I knew. A job that drained me. A city that felt too small. Friends who'd stopped asking how I was really doing. My mother had cried when I told her I was leaving, said I was running away from my problems instead of facing them. Maybe she was right, but I couldn't breathe there anymore. So here I was. Los Angeles. The city of reinvention. The city where people came to become someone else. I cut the engine and stepped out into the heat. The neighborhood was quiet, almost unnervingly so. Rows of houses lined the cul-de-sac, each one close enough to hear your neighbor's television, but far enough to pretend you couldn't. The kind of place where people waved but didn't ask questions. Perfect. I was hauling my second suitcase up the driveway when I heard it. A bark, deep and friendly, followed by a woman's laugh. Not a polite laugh, but something genuine, the kind that made you want to know what was so funny. I looked up. That's when I saw her for the first time. She was standing in the yard next door, throwing a tennis ball for a golden retriever who bounded after it like his life depended on catching it. The woman wore running clothes, dark athletic shorts, and a fitted tank top that showed off arms I tried very hard not to stare at. Her hair was styled in long box braids pulled back into a high ponytail, and even from a distance, I could see the way the late afternoon sun caught the warm brown of her skin. She turned slightly, and I got a better look at her face. Strong jawline. High cheekbones. The kind of beauty that didn't need anything extra, no makeup, no performance. Just her. The dog dropped the ball at her feet and barked again. She laughed and picked it up, winding her arm back to throw. That's when she noticed me. Our eyes met for just a second. She smiled, small and polite, the kind of smile you give a stranger. I felt my face flush hot and quickly looked away, fumbling with my suitcase like it was the most interesting thing in the world. Smooth, Maya. Real smooth. By the time I risked another glance, she'd already gone inside. That first night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren, every unfamiliar sound kept me awake. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. Around 2 a.m, I gave up and went to the kitchen for water. That's when I saw the light next door. Her backyard was visible through my kitchen window, separated only by a low fence and a few feet of grass. A single lamp illuminated her patio, and there she was, sitting in a lawn chair with a glass of something dark, red wine maybe. The dog, Apollo, I'd learn his name later, was curled at her feet. She sat perfectly still, staring out into the darkness like she was waiting for something. Or maybe trying to forget something. I should have looked away. I knew I should have. But something about the scene held me there. The loneliness of it. The quiet weight in her posture. The way she brought the glass to her lips slowly, like she was trying to make the moment last. I recognized that loneliness. I'd been carrying it for months. Finally, she stood, stretched, and disappeared inside. The light went out, and I was left standing in my dark kitchen, wondering who she was and why I couldn't stop thinking about her. I learned her name 3 days later. I'd been avoiding going outside, embarrassed by how awkward our first meeting had been. But Apollo had other plans. I was carrying groceries from my car when he came bounding over, tail wagging so hard his whole body shook, pulling at his leash. "Apollo, come back here." She jogged over, slightly out of breath, being pulled along by Apollo's enthusiasm. She was wearing scrubs this time, navy blue with her name embroidered on the chest. Dr. Simone Carter. The letters were small, but I caught them before she got close enough for it to be weird that I was staring. "I'm so sorry," she said, gripping his leash firmly. "He thinks everyone wants to be his friend." "He's not wrong," I said, kneeling down to let Apollo lick my hand. "I definitely want to be his friend." She laughed, and it was even better up close. "Warm. Real. You must be the new neighbor." "I'm Simone." "Maya," I said, standing back up. "Just moved in. Welcome to the neighborhood." She tilted her head slightly, studying me with dark brown eyes that seemed to see more than I wanted them to. "How are you settling in?" "Still unpacking," I said. Literally and figuratively. Simone smiled at that, a knowing kind of smile. "Yeah, LA has that effect. Takes a while to feel like you're not just visiting your own life." The words hit harder than she probably intended. That's exactly what it felt like. Like I was a guest in my own existence, waiting for permission to actually live here. "You'll find your rhythm," she continued, her voice softer now. "And if you need anything, I'm next door. Well, when I'm actually home. I'm a doctor at Cedars-Sinai, so my schedule's a little unpredictable." "A doctor," I repeated, and suddenly everything about her made sense. The calm confidence. The way she carried herself like someone used to making life-or-death decisions. "That's impressive." She shrugged, but something flickered across her face. Fatigue, maybe. Or something heavier. Some days more than others. Apollo barked, impatient to continue their walk. Simone gave his leash a gentle tug. "I should let you get back to your groceries. But really, Maya, if you need anything, just knock." "I will," I said, even though I knew I probably wouldn't. She jogged off down the street, Apollo trotting beside her, and I stood there watching until they disappeared around the corner. After that, I started noticing everything. Simone left for work every morning before dawn. I'd hear her car start, see the headlights sweep across my bedroom wall. Some mornings, if I was awake, I'd watch from the window as she loaded Apollo into the back seat, her movements efficient and practiced. She'd come home late, sometimes not until 10 or 11 at night. The exhaustion was visible even from a distance. The way her shoulders sagged as she walked to her front door. The way she'd stand there for a moment before going inside, like she needed to gather herself first. On her days off, she ran. Every single time. 6 in the morning, like clockwork, she'd be out there in her running clothes, Apollo pulling at his leash with puppy enthusiasm despite being fully grown. And then there were the evenings. The evenings when she'd sit in her backyard, glass of wine in hand, staring at nothing. Sometimes she'd do yoga first, her body moving through poses with a grace that made my chest ache. Other times she'd just sit, lost in thought, with only Apollo for company. I told myself I wasn't spying. I was just aware. The kitchen window faced her yard. It wasn't my fault I spent a lot of time washing dishes, or making coffee, or just standing there in the dark, watching her exist in her private moments. It became a ritual I didn't want to admit to. My evening routine now included checking if she was outside. And when she was, I couldn't look away. There was something magnetic about her solitude. The way she'd tilt her head back, exposing the elegant line of her throat. The way her fingers would drum against her wine glass, restless. The way she'd sometimes pull out her phone, stare at it, then put it away without calling anyone. Who was she texting? Or not texting? Who did she want to talk to at midnight? I wanted to know. God, I wanted to know everything. 2 weeks after moving in, I almost got caught. It was a Friday night. Simone had been doing yoga on her patio, and I'd been watching from my usual spot at the kitchen sink, pretending to rinse dishes that were already clean. She moved through a sequence I didn't know the name of, her body a study in strength and control. When she bent forward, her tank top rode up slightly, revealing the small of her back, the curve of her spine. I leaned closer to the window without thinking. That's when she straightened suddenly and turned toward my house. Panic shot through me like ice water. I dropped to the floor instantly, heart hammering against my ribs. Had she seen me? Did she know? I stayed there for what felt like hours, but was probably only a minute, crouched below the window like a teenager hiding from their parents. When I finally dared to peek again, she was rolling up her yoga mat, showing no sign that she'd noticed anything unusual. But my hands were shaking. I sat on my kitchen floor in the dark, breathing hard, feeling equal parts ashamed and exhilarated. This was wrong. I knew it was wrong. You don't watch people without their knowledge. You don't steal moments that aren't meant for you. But I couldn't stop, because in those stolen glimpses, I felt less alone. Like we were sharing something, even if she didn't know it. Like maybe, just maybe, we were both carrying the same kind of emptiness. The breaking point came 3 weeks after I moved in. I'd spent the evening trying to work on my laptop, trying to focus on the freelance project I'd taken to pay the bills. But concentration was impossible. My mind kept drifting next door, wondering if Simone was home, if she was sitting outside again, if she was okay. Around 10, I gave up and went to the kitchen for tea. She was there, of course, sitting in her usual chair, wine in hand. But tonight was different. Tonight, her head was bowed, her shoulders shaking slightly. Even from a distance, I could tell she was crying. Apollo sat at her feet, his head resting on her knee, like he was trying to comfort her. My chest constricted painfully. I stood frozen at the window, watching this woman I barely knew fall apart in the privacy of her own backyard. Part of me wanted to look away, to give her this moment of vulnerability without an audience. But a bigger part of me wanted to run over there, to sit beside her, to ask what was wrong, to tell her she didn't have to carry whatever this was alone. But I didn't. I just stood there, helpless, as she cried. Eventually, she wiped her eyes, finished her wine, and went inside. The light went out. The yard went dark. And I was left standing in my kitchen, aching with the need to do something, anything, to help. That's when I made the decision. I couldn't keep watching from a distance. I couldn't keep stealing these moments without actually connecting. If I wanted to know Simone, really know her, I had to be brave enough to cross that fence. I had to find a reason to knock on her door. The next evening, I stood on Simone's porch with my heart in my throat. I'd spent all day rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd explain showing up unannounced. The excuse I'd settled on was weak, almost embarrassingly transparent, but it was all I had. I raised my fist and knocked before I could chicken out. Apollo barked immediately. Then footsteps. Then the door opened, and there she was. Simone stood barefoot in soft clothes, a faded college sweatshirt and gray joggers that somehow made her look even more beautiful than the polished version I'd seen in Scrubs. Her braids were loose around her shoulders, and her face held that soft, unguarded expression people only wear at home. Maya? Surprise flickered across her features. Everything okay? Hey, yeah, I held up my phone like an offering. This is embarrassing, but my charger died and I need to order a new one online. Do you happen to have one I could borrow? Just for tonight. It was such an obvious lie. We both knew it. But Simone's expression softened into something that looked almost like amusement. Of course. Come in. And just like that, I stepped across her threshold and into a world I'd only seen from a distance. Her home was nothing like I'd imagined, and exactly what I'd hoped. Warm lighting, comfortable furniture, walls lined with bookshelves that actually held books, not just decorations. The faint scent of sandalwood incense hung in the air. Have a seat, she said, disappearing into another room. I've got a spare somewhere. I sank onto her couch, my eyes immediately scanning the space for clues about who she really was. That's when I saw them. On the coffee table, partially hidden under a medical journal, were 2 books. One was poetry by Audre Lorde. The other was a novel with a distinctly queer love story on the cover. My heart skipped. Before I could process what that might mean, my gaze traveled to the wall where several framed sketches hung. Real art. Charcoal drawings of cityscapes, intertwined hands, and one particularly striking piece showing a woman's back, muscular and tender all at once. You draw? I asked when Simone returned, charger in hand. She followed my gaze and something flickered across her face. Vulnerability, maybe. Just a hobby. Helps me decompress. They're beautiful, I said, and meant it. Each piece carried raw emotion, the kind artists don't show unless it matters deeply to them. Thanks. She handed me the charger, then settled into the chair across from me. Not many people get to see them. The weight of that admission hung between us. "I'm honored then," I said softly. Our eyes met, and for a moment the air shifted, charged with something unspoken, something that made my pulse quicken and my skin feel too warm. Apollo broke the moment by patting over and resting his massive head in my lap. I laughed, grateful for the interruption, and scratched behind his ears. "He likes you," Simone observed, a smile playing at her lips. "The feeling's mutual." Silence settled again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt full, like we were both waiting for something neither of us was brave enough to say. "How are you really doing?" Simone asked suddenly, leaning forward with her elbows on her knees. "With the move, I mean. It's not easy starting over." The question caught me off guard with its sincerity. Most people asked but didn't really want to know. But Simone's eyes told me she actually cared about the answer. "Honestly," I exhaled. "Some days I feel like I'm drowning. Like I left everything behind, and now I'm just floating, not connected to anything." She nodded slowly, understanding crossing her face. "I felt that way when I first moved here for my residency. I thought having a purpose, a job, would be enough. But purpose doesn't always cure loneliness." The word loneliness hung in the air between us, heavy and true. "How did you get through it?" I asked. "I'm not sure I did," she admitted quietly. "I just learned to live with it. Fill the empty spaces with work, with routine." She paused, her gaze distant. "Sometimes I still feel like I'm waiting for my real life to start." My chest ached at the sadness in her voice. This brilliant, beautiful woman who saved lives for a living felt just as lost as I did. "Maybe we're both waiting for the same thing," I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes snapped to mine, sharp and searching. "What's that?" "Someone to wait with." The words hung there, intimate and dangerous. Simone's expression shifted, something flickering behind her eyes that I couldn't quite read. "Want, maybe. Or fear. Or both." She opened her mouth to respond when her phone buzzed loudly on the side table. The spell broke. She glanced at the screen and sighed. "Hospital," she said apologetically. "I'm on call tonight." "Of course." I stood quickly, clutching the borrowed charger. "I should go anyway. Thanks for this." "Maya," she said as I reached the door. I turned back. "You can come over anytime. You don't need an excuse." The warmth in her voice nearly undid me. "Same to you," I managed. "My door's always open." I walked home in a daze, my mind replaying every moment, every word, every charged silence. I'd been inside her home, seen her art, her books, the pieces of herself she didn't show the world. And she'd seen something in me too. I could feel it. As I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, I knew everything had changed. I wasn't just the woman watching from the window anymore. I was someone Simone had invited in. And God help me, I wanted to go deeper. The days after that night blurred together in a strange, expectant haze. I kept telling myself to act normal, to not read too much into a borrowed charger and a conversation on her couch. But normal felt impossible when every interaction with Simone seemed to carry extra weight now, like we were both aware of something hovering just beneath the surface. We started running into each other more often. Or maybe we'd always run into each other this much, and I was just paying closer attention now. Monday morning, I was getting my mail when she pulled into her driveway after what must have been a night shift. She looked exhausted, her scrubs wrinkled, her braids pulled back messily. But when she saw me, she smiled. "Rough night?" I asked. "They're all rough," she said, but her tone was light. "Coffee's the only thing keeping me upright." "I just made a fresh pot," I offered before I could overthink it. "If you want some that's actually good instead of whatever hospital sludge you've been drinking." She hesitated, glancing at her house, then back at me. "You know what? Yeah, I'd love that." 10 minutes later, we were sitting at my kitchen table, steam rising from our mugs. Simone had her hands wrapped around hers like she was trying to absorb the warmth. "I lost a patient last night," she said suddenly, staring into her coffee. 18-year-old kid. Car accident. We did everything we could, but..." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. I'm so sorry, I said quietly. It's part of the job. You'd think I'd be used to it by now. She took a long sip, her jaw tight. But you never really get used to it. Every single one stays with you. I watched her sitting there, this strong woman who held people's lives in her hands, looking so incredibly human in her grief. Without thinking, I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. You don't have to be used to it, I said. Being affected by it means you still care. That matters. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw something crack in that carefully maintained composure. Gratitude, maybe, or relief at being allowed to be vulnerable. She turned her hand over, her fingers curling slightly around mine. The touch was brief, but it sent electricity racing up my arm. Thank you, she whispered. We sat like that for a while, hands barely touching across my kitchen table, not talking, just existing together in the weight of her loss. When she finally left to get some sleep, I stood at the door watching her walk back to her house, and I knew something fundamental had shifted between us. I wasn't just the neighbor anymore. I was becoming her person. Thursday evening, I heard music coming from her backyard. Not the usual quiet. This was actual music, something with a strong beat that vibrated faintly through the shared fence. Curiosity got the better of me, and I wandered into my own backyard, pretending to check on the pathetic herb garden the previous tenant had abandoned. That's when I saw her. Simone was dancing, not practicing yoga or doing some structured exercise routine, just dancing freely in her backyard, a beer in one hand, Apollo watching from the shade. Her body moved unselfconsciously to the rhythm, loose and joyful in a way I'd never seen her before. She spun and caught sight of me standing awkwardly by my fence. Instead of stopping, embarrassed, she grinned and waved me over. Come here, she called over the music. You're making me feel like I'm having a party alone. I hesitated for only a second before opening the gate between our yards and stepping onto her property. The music was louder here, something with a driving bass line that made it impossible to stand still. Celebrating something? I asked. Yeah. She took a long drink of her beer. I'm officially off for the next 3 days. No hospital, no pager, no emergencies. Just me and freedom and terrible beer. She offered me the bottle. I took it and drank, even though I didn't particularly like beer. It tasted like rebellion and possibility. Dance with me, Simone said, already moving to the music again. I'm a terrible dancer. Good. So am I. She grabbed my hand and pulled me into the space beside her, and suddenly we were moving together, laughing at how ridiculous we probably looked. Simone had rhythm, natural and easy, while I had enthusiasm and not much else. But it didn't matter. The sun was setting, painting her backyard in gold and amber light. Apollo barked excitedly, running circles around us. And Simone was laughing, really laughing, her head thrown back, her whole body alive with joy. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this light, this free. The song changed to something slower, and without discussing it, we both slowed down too. Simone's hand was still in mine, and now her other hand came to rest lightly on my waist. Not pulling me closer, but not letting go either. We swayed together, barely dancing, mostly just being close. I could smell her perfume mixed with the faint scent of beer and summer grass. Her face was inches from mine, her eyes soft and unguarded in the fading light. I'm glad you moved here, she said quietly, her voice almost lost under the music. Me too, I managed, my heart pounding so hard I was sure she could feel it. For one breathless moment, I thought she might kiss me. Her gaze dropped to my lips, lingered there. The air between us felt charged, heavy with possibility. My breath caught. Then Apollo barked loudly and shoved his nose between us, demanding attention. We broke apart laughing, the moment diffused but not forgotten. Worst wingman ever, Simone muttered, bending down to scratch his ears. I didn't trust myself to speak. My whole body was humming from being that close to her, from the almost kiss that still hung in the air between us. We spent the rest of the evening in her backyard, talking and laughing as the stars came out. But that moment on the makeshift dance floor stayed with me, playing on repeat in my mind. She'd almost kissed me. And I'd wanted her to. Saturday morning, everything fell apart. I woke up to the sound of shouting. Angry voices carrying through the walls, loud enough to pull me from sleep. At first, I thought it was coming from the street, but as I sat up, I realized it was closer. Much closer. Simone's house. I stumbled to the window and saw a car I didn't recognize in her driveway. A silver sedan with rental plates. And on her front porch, Simone stood facing a woman I'd never seen before. The woman was tall, elegant, dressed like she'd just come from somewhere expensive. Her hair was perfectly styled, her posture rigid with anger. And she was yelling. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. The body language said everything. This was an argument that had been building for a while. Simone stood with her arms crossed, her expression closed off in a way I'd never seen. The woman gesticulated wildly, pointing at Simone, at the house, then back at herself. Simone just shook her head, calm but immovable. Finally, the woman turned and stormed back to her car. She paused with her hand on the door, said something that made Simone flinch, then drove away fast enough to leave skid marks. Simone stood there alone on her porch for a long moment, her shoulders sagging. Then she went inside and slammed the door. I spent the rest of the day trying not to think about what I'd witnessed. Who was that woman? An ex? A current girlfriend I didn't know about? The thought made my stomach twist with something ugly and jealous. By evening, I couldn't stand it anymore. Simone hadn't emerged from her house all day. No yoga, no sitting outside, nothing. Just silence. I made soup. It was a flimsy excuse, but it was all I had. I ladled it into a container, walked to her door, and knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Simone? It's Maya. I brought food. Still nothing. I was about to give up when the door opened. Simone stood there in an old t-shirt and shorts, her eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying. Apollo pushed past her to greet me, tail wagging. Hey, she said, her voice rough. Sorry, I'm not really fit for company right now. I'm not company, I said gently. I'm your neighbor who saw you have a really shitty morning and thought you might need soup. She stared at me for a moment, then something in her expression crumbled. Come in. Her house was dark, curtains drawn, no lights on even though the sun had set. I set the soup on her kitchen counter and turned to face her. Do you want to talk about it? I asked. Not particularly. She leaned against the counter, arms wrapped around herself defensively. But you saw, so I guess I owe you an explanation. You don't owe me anything. That was my ex, she said anyway, the words tumbling out like she needed to say them. Rachel. We dated for 3 years. Broke up about 6 months ago, but she's having trouble accepting that it's over. I'm sorry. Don't be. Simone laughed bitterly. It needed to end. We wanted different things. She wanted me to be someone I'm not. Someone easier. Someone who didn't bring work stress home, who went to her fancy parties and smiled at the right people and never, ever talked about being. She stopped abruptly, her jaw clenching. Being what? I asked softly. Simone looked at me, really looked at me, like she was deciding something important. Gay. Out. Visible. Rachel wanted to keep us quiet. Didn't want to deal with her family knowing, her colleagues, anyone. Said it was nobody's business. But after a while, being someone's secret felt less like privacy and more like shame. The pain in her voice made my chest ache. I moved closer, closing the distance between us. You deserve someone who's proud to be with you, I said. Someone who sees you as you are and doesn't ask you to hide. Yeah, well. She wiped at her eyes roughly. Haven't found that person yet. Maybe you have, I said before I could stop myself. The words hung in the air, bold and terrifying. Simone's eyes widened slightly, her breath catching. Maya, I see you, I continued, my heart racing but my voice steady. I see how hard you work, how much you care, how strong you are even when you're breaking. I see the art you create and the books you read, and the way you sit outside at night because you're lonely too. I see you, Simone. All of you. And I'm not looking away. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She reached for me, her hand cupping my face with a tenderness that made my knees weak. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I'm so tired of being hurt. Then let me be gentle with you. She pulled me into a hug then, fierce and desperate, her face buried in my shoulder. I held her while she cried, feeling the tension drain from her body as she finally let herself be vulnerable with someone who wouldn't use it against her. We stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other in her dark kitchen, Apollo sitting patiently at our feet. When Simone finally pulled back, she kept her hands on my shoulders like she needed the anchor. Stay, she said. Please. I don't want to be alone tonight. Okay, I agreed without hesitation. We ate the soup I'd brought, sitting on her couch with the television playing something neither of us watched. Simone kept her body close to mine, our shoulders touching, her hand occasionally finding mine. Tell me about why you came to LA, she said eventually. The real reason. I took a breath, surprised by how much I wanted to tell her. I was suffocating. In this life I'd built that looked good on paper but felt empty. Working a job I hated, dating people who didn't see me, living in a place where everyone thought they knew who I was. I needed to become someone new. Or maybe just figure out who I actually am. And have you? Figured it out. I'm starting to. I turned to look at her. Being here. Meeting you. It's like I can finally breathe. Simone's thumb traced circles on the back of my hand, the touch casual but intimate. I haven't felt this connected to someone in years. Maybe ever. And it scares me. Scares me too. What if I'm not ready? What if I mess this up? What if you don't? I countered gently. She smiled, sad but hopeful. You make it sound simple. Maybe it can be. Maybe we're both just overthinking it. The night deepened around us. We talked about everything and nothing. Her worst day in medical school, my most embarrassing childhood memory, the futures we'd imagined for ourselves that never materialized. Slowly, the heaviness lifted. At some point, I realized I was leaning against her, my head on her shoulder. Her arm was around me, her fingers playing absently with my hair. It felt natural, like we'd been doing this for years instead of barely knowing each other for a month. I used to watch you, I admitted suddenly, made brave by the darkness and her closeness. From my kitchen window. At night when you'd sit outside. I know that's weird, but I couldn't help it. You looked so beautiful and so sad, and I wanted to know why. I felt her smile against my hair. I know. My heart stopped. You know, I caught you once. Maybe 2 weeks ago. Looking out your window while I was doing yoga. Her voice was amused, not accusatory. You ducked down so fast I thought you'd hurt yourself. Heat flooded my face. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. That's so creepy, Maya. She pulled back to look at me, her eyes soft in the dim light. I started staying outside longer after that. Hoping you'd keep watching. Hoping you'd eventually come over. Really? Really? Her hand came up to cup my cheek. I've been lonely for so long. And then you moved in next door, and suddenly I wasn't anymore. Even when we weren't talking, knowing you were there, it helped. I felt the same way, I whispered. We sat there, faces inches apart, the air thick with everything unspoken. This time, there was no dog to interrupt. No phone call, no distraction. Just us and the question of what came next. Can I kiss you? Simone asked, her voice barely audible. Please. She closed the distance slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away. But I didn't want to pull away. I'd been waiting for this since the moment I first saw her. Her lips met mine softly, tentatively, like she was afraid I might disappear. But when I kissed her back, deepening the connection, she made a sound low in her throat and pulled me closer. The kiss was everything I'd imagined and nothing like I'd expected. Gentle but intense, sweet but desperate, full of all the loneliness and longing we'd both been carrying. Her hands threaded through my hair while mine found her waist, pulling her closer still. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Simone rested her forehead against mine. I've wanted to do that since you borrowed my charger, she admitted. I laughed breathlessly. I didn't actually need the charger. I know, she smiled. Your phone was at 70%. I saw the battery icon. And you still let me in. I was hoping you'd stay. We kissed again, slower this time, learning each other. The taste of her, the feel of her body against mine, the way she sighed when my fingers traced her jaw. It felt like coming home to a place I'd never been but had always been searching for. Eventually, we settled back on the couch, tangled together, my head on her chest, listening to her heartbeat steady beneath my ear. Apollo had claimed the other end of the couch, snoring softly. "What happens now?" I asked into the comfortable silence. Simone's fingers traced patterns on my back. "I don't know, but I want to find out. With you. Even though it's scary? Especially because it's scary." She pressed a kiss to the top of my head. Anything worth having usually is. We stayed like that until we both dozed off, wrapped in each other, the weight of loneliness finally lifted. When I woke sometime in the early morning, disoriented in the darkness, Simone was still there, her arms secure around me. For the first time since moving to Los Angeles, I felt like I'd found exactly what I'd been looking for. Not a fresh start or a new identity. Just someone to be seen by. Someone to see in return. Someone to wait with while life figured itself out. And as I drifted back to sleep in Simone's arms, I realized my mother had been wrong. I hadn't been running away from my problems. I'd been running toward something I didn't know existed. I'd been running toward her. Sometimes the person you need most lives right next door. Sometimes love finds you when you're brave enough to stop hiding. And sometimes the best stories are the ones we're still writing, one day at a time. If this story touched your heart the way Simone touched mine, I'd love for you to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Love Beyond Rules for more stories about finding love in unexpected places. And if these words meant something to you, consider supporting our channel so we can keep bringing you stories that celebrate love in all its beautiful forms. Until next time, remember, you deserve to be seen. You deserve to be loved. And somewhere out there, your person is looking for you too.